Is there a way to reconcile the tough offshore culture with mindfulness, a concept originating in meditation? How can mindfulness work in offshore contexts and be accepted by workers as a useful and viable next step to building a safe work environment? To date, these questions remain unanswered, with no empirical assessment of the effectiveness of mindfulness in improving safety offshore. To fill this gap, our project, funded by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine's Gulf Research Program, developed a novel offshore mindfulness training program that targets well-being and situation awareness through mindfulness practice to improve safety. Through university-industry collaboration, our partners from Baker Hughes and Diamond Offshore Drilling have provided us with a valuable insight into how to effectively utilize culturally appropriate mindfulness techniques for safety in the offshore working environment. Our project directly maps onto the Gulf Research Program's goal of addressing the unique challenges that exist at the intersection of human, environmental, and energy systems in the Gulf of Mexico, by developing a mindfulness-based intervention that targets both health and well-being and safety to ultimately facilitate improved safety outcomes. Our specific goals are in line with this. Our first goal was to develop a theoretical model for examining the complex interplay between situation awareness, employee well-being, and health, factors that affect process and personal safety outcomes. We predict that mindfulness will ultimately impact personal and process safety through multiple pathways. Specifically, practicing mindfulness may increase work situation awareness, decrease burnout, and increase worker well-being. This may subsequently influence worker safety and increase participation and engagement with safety procedures. Increased safety compliance and participation may in turn influence both process and individual safety events, such as slips, trips, and falls. Our second goal was to develop mindfulness interventions appropriate for use at a work site in an offshore installation. Our third goal was to implement this offshore mindfulness intervention and test its effectiveness in influencing employee well-being, health, and both personal and process safety. How do we effectively execute mindfulness training in the offshore environment? We learned from best practices in developing and implementing mindfulness interventions and focused on understanding how offshore culture and mindfulness could be reconciled successfully. We took advice from Elizabeth Stanley's work on mindfulness interventions among military population and Ute Hulshager's work on workplace mindfulness interventions, which provide valuable information about the development and implementation of mindfulness interventions with tough populations. However, necessary to translate this to offshore environment is information about the safety criticality of specific offshore tasks. To determine the type of tasks where attention has to be maintained for safety, we conducted a functional job analysis in 3 phases. First, we identified core tasks across several jobs through interviews with subject matter experts. Second, we identified and qualitatively assessed critical incidents and elements of the work environment that may influence safety events. Third, we asked additional subject matter experts to rate the importance and safety criticality of core job tasks. We found that there are some tasks, such as operating equipment, that are more critical for personal safety for the driller position, for instance, than for other positions. Conversely, there are some core tasks that were similarly safety critical across all positions. Indeed, 41% of workers across all positions indicated that moving and handling machinery was the most safety critical task. Also, our results indicated that 32% of workers considered too many people with multiple conversations in the same area as the most distracting aspect of the job. Examples of safety ideal in at-risk situations further underscore how communication leads to positive process safety outcomes, while time pressure and complacency might impact workers' personal safety. For example, several workers reported safety-critical events relating to lapses in situation awareness that led to serious personal safety events. These examples illuminate the necessity for improving situation awareness and improving safety. What does prior research tell us about the prospect of using mindfulness to promote workplace safety? Is what we are proposing to do with our study even valuable? We conducted a systematic review of 34 relevant studies to help answer these questions. 17 studies test the relationship between trait mindfulness and safety, and 17 test the effectiveness of mindfulness-based interventions in improving workplace safety. These analyses demonstrated that mindfulness or situation awareness is positively and strongly associated with safety. Mindfulness is most strongly related to a reduction in cognitive failure, followed by safety behaviors and safety events. Most studies found that participation in mindfulness training improves workplace safety. Despite varying training length, dosage, and delivery method, several types of mindfulness interventions and techniques were effective in promoting safety compliance and performance and decreasing safety events such as work-related accidents and injuries. Notably, some successful intervention studies also adapted already established mindfulness interventions to specific occupations such as healthcare professionals and military personnel. How did we implement a study to test the effectiveness of mindfulness-based training among offshore workers in the Gulf of Mexico? We leveraged two key principles learned from our decade-spanning work on safety training with energy industry workers. First, to involve respected offshore workers at our partner companies as initiative champions, and second, to establish a direct linkage of our mindfulness intervention with strategy-driven safety goals at each partner organization. In collaboration with Baker Hughes and Diamond Offshore Drilling, Inc. industry partners, we implemented the Time to Refocus program. We utilized train-the-trainer approaches to facilitate engagement in our mindfulness-based intervention offshore. Our trained crew champions, enrolled employees in the exercises and data collection components of the study, delivered the introductory Time to Refocus training, led one of the 2 daily mindfulness exercises at the beginning of their shift, and encouraged workers to engage in their second mindfulness exercise at the beginning of a high-risk period. Each worker acquired the skill set to deploy 4 different mindfulness techniques. At its core, the practice of mindfulness guides one away from being preoccupied by thoughts and towards one's current experiences. Mindfulness enhances worker well-being, the potential for adaptability, and increases attention to our current experiences. These processes are linked to enhanced self-control and emotion regulation, which can improve task behaviors related to safety. 68% of participants indicated that they preferred the Notice 5 Things technique. I will now take a moment to demonstrate this technique. First, pause for a moment and take a deep breath. Look around you and take note of 5 things you can see. Now listen carefully and take note of 5 things you can hear. Now take note of 5 things you can feel in contact with your body. For example, maybe you can notice the feeling of your shirt against your back or the feeling of your feet touching the ground. After workers attended the initial training sessions led by industry partner trainers, they were invited to participate in the research component. We collect data at baseline, immediately following the 28-day program, and 3 months following completion of this intervention. During the 28-day program, surveys were also collected on a daily basis through the Real Life EXP smartphone app, allowing us to collect data from workers without access to reliable, fast internet. Daily surveys enabled us to test the relationship between adherence to the daily mindfulness activities, worker situation awareness, burnout, sleep quality, well-being, and daily safety events. Also, though most participants were able to complete the daily surveys on the smartphone app, we were flexible in our daily survey delivery, and a small percentage of our study participants completed the daily surveys via email. For our 2-year project, we have recently deployed our 3-month follow-up surveys to the Time to Refocus participants, and we are conducting data analysis on survey and process personal safety data, along with advising our Time to Refocus program to other partner company facilities. Though data collection is not yet complete, our preliminary results show that over 60% of workers indicated that they have sufficient time to get the job done well. About 1/3 of workers reported not having enough time to get things done, or that the amount of work they were expected to do was too great. 1 in 5 workers felt preoccupied with family concerns at work, posing possible safety risks. Family work conflict and the qualitative and quantitative workload experienced by the offshore workers in our study emphasize the need for interventions that allow workers to retain a high level of focus and mindfulness throughout the day. Daily survey data suggests that workers are engaging in the mindfulness training program. On average, workers report practicing a Time to Refocus technique 2 times a day for a total of 3 minutes. Ultimately, our project's goal is to utilize mindfulness to help reshape the Gulf of Mexico's offshore culture to one where focused attention is a skill gained and grown through mindfulness practice. We have kept dissemination at the forefront of our minds to ensure that investment in our project will yield dividends for Gulf of Mexico offshore workers, their families, and communities. Of course, a key goal is to contribute to the scientific discourse on safety culture at high-risk environments through journal publications and conference participation at research and industry conferences. We will also develop an implementation toolkit that will contain the mindfulness exercises that were identified as most effective for offshore populations, along with recommendation on exercise implementation in the Gulf of Mexico. Finally, we will utilize our project's website to promote free resources online, present study results, and showcase our implementation toolkit and database of personal and process safety outcome measurement. As we continue to collect and analyze data to assess the effectiveness of our mindfulness training program, our project aims to address the unique challenges that exist at the intersection of human, environmental, and energy systems in the Gulf of Mexico by targeting worker health, well-being, and safety with mindfulness.